now alive. So we're going to be doing this webinar now with Billy and Jimmy, talking about a bunch of news which has just got released yesterday to do with Smashing Pumpkins. So how are you both doing, first and foremost?
Yeah, really good. Just sequestered in my house in an undisclosed location, talking to you.
Yeah, nice.
We're in the studio pretty much every day. So even though we're at separate secret locations, we get together at another secret location, and we're working on new music every day. That what we'll call the sequel record. So we're in good spirits. It's always good to work and make new music. So, and we're happy to talk about this because it feels important. You know, there's not many times where you stop and think, okay, this is important. Like I need to actually appreciate this moment, and this is certainly one of them. Yeah,
I sat and watched your Instagram live where you announced all the separate things that were happening, which was frankly mind-boggling, the amount of work that you seem to be doing constantly. I know that it's, as we were discussing before we started this, staying creative is definitely the way forward at the moment. So it's just seems that you both have taken up to like a whole new level of endeavor, shall we say, it seems.
Well, I mean, if you want to be reflective, during the Melancholy sessions, I think we worked on over 50 songs at the same time. So I know I'm not like trying to make it sound weird, but like actually 33 is not as daunting as it sounds, as opposed to 50. Because with 50, you know, with the 50 that we're working on Melancholy, and Jimmy's memory tends to be better than mine on this stuff, but you know, we were coming every day for band practice and work for about 6 hours. We were asking 4 people to remember the arrangements of a bunch of different songs day to day. And we were flipping around a lot. It wasn't like we would work on the same songs every day. We'd work on some pile over here, and then we may not work on something for 2 weeks. And so what do you remember about that, JC?
Yeah, I mean, that's it, right? Just a ton of work and a ton of note-taking and a ton of remembering. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of music and a lot of songs, you know, and a lot of songs that we didn't end up using, that the parts just informed, you know, songs that we ended up continuing to work on. So in addition to the 50 songs that we recorded, there was probably another 25 ideas that we were kicking around that led to something else or became a part of something else. So there's a lot of information. I mean, I think over the years, we got better and better at it. So by the time we got to Melancholy, we were able to kind of manage that workflow pretty well. And even today, I mean, we're, to your point, 33 songs to us now is really like what we've been working on arrangements for 2 weeks, and we're pretty much, you know, 3/4 of the way there. So I think, you know, you've obviously got to have good time management skills, memory, those types of things. But when you're in the trenches, I mean, you're playing them every day, and your muscle memory, and your body ends up taking over where your brain leaves off, and it just becomes one kind of blur of music.
Yeah. It seems as well that you must have these super creative patches to be able to actually to work on that amount of stuff, but also to the quality that it is as well, because I know that a lot of people, when they write, as you said, there'll be things that will inform the songs that end up becoming the final tracks, but a lot of stuff is often discarded as well. So, but to be working on such a vast amount of stuff, I guess the quality is all super high. You must be in a really creative patch.
It feels good. It took me a while to kind of wrap my head around the new world. I feel like I've been in 3 different phases of my musical life, and obviously I call this phase 3 or something. It sounds a bit more nerdy than I wanted to be, but yeah, it's kind of like if phase 1 was learning how to be the Smashing Pumpkins, phase 2 was learning how to live with what that monster was, and then phase 3 was sort of figuring out that all those things that I learned along the way could be adapted into a newer type of music that felt more of this time as opposed to another time.
Yeah.
And anybody who's been through that process, which I can't imagine there's been a lot of people who've been through it, because you have to have sustained success over time to even be in that spot where you can kind of confront that. It makes me like, when I'll pick an artist who I really admire, Eric Clapton, for example. When I was a kid, I really loved Cream and like the hard kind of blues of Eric Clapton. But I was also growing up at the time when he was doing stuff like Lay Down Sally and the J.J. Cale songs. I didn't get it at all. I was like, why does this guy want to do this other thing? And now I really love that music, but also I understood it was like his way of evolving kind of what he was good at. You know, he emphasized more being a singer or a different type of style of playing. And you have to really go through those transformations to find a new vein of music. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. People want you to kind of consciously, unconsciously write the same types of songs. And what's weird is we actually can. There are actually demos that we've cut for this new record that sound like Siamese Dream, but we don't get the same rush of adrenaline from them because we already did that. So even though we like it and we go, oh, it's kind of cool. There was one we were listening to yesterday. I mean, it literally sounds like it could be a Siamese Dream B-side, you know? And we listen to it and we go like, and then we listen to something else that's kind of like, we don't understand it. And it just feels like 10 times more fresh and more exciting. And I think it's really cool that, you know, where we're at, you know, our relationship, I mean, ours goes over, 32 years. We get super excited. Like we're like kids again because we found something new. Yeah. You know, we have to really monitor that energy as a sign that means there's new songs, there's new drum fills, there's new ideas, there's new ways to tackle a problem. That's our engagement. And something about that energy translation translates to people listening. And that's where it's sort of weird because you kind of feel this pressure to kind of do what you already did. But then when you do it, you go, this doesn't feel the same.
Yeah. No, I understand that. It must be weird as well to be in this situation where we currently find ourselves that, you're celebrating the anniversary of a landmark album. I mean, they're all landmark albums if we're being honest, but without going into that too much. But you know what I'm saying? It's so to be currently thinking about that, then to be working on this follow-up to that record and Machina, and then to be, on the cusp of releasing Sia as well, there's these huge fragments of time that all have this huge, like an incredible resonance to them that you currently seem to be balancing or juggling really well.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's an emotional continuity to the music, which is kind of what keeps us centered. But our goal is really to reinvent the languaging in which we kind of decipher those and administer those emotions through our instruments, really. And that's kind of the fun, the journey in developing new languages, having new tools. And, even if you're talking about the same type of emotions, the languaging makes them interesting and offers a different viewpoint, both for us, I think, and the listener as well. So, I think about the Melancholy sessions. I think about most of the work was really trying to find a new way to say some of the same things and make them interesting again, right? I mean, there's only so many feelings that go around, and obviously they're multi-tangential, but the languaging is what keeps it interesting for us, really, to develop and challenge ourselves to kind of develop new ways to say things, new instrumentation, new ways to approach the drum set, and not be reliant on old tropes to create music. That's really the goal of the band, is to be in an evolutionary state kind of at all times.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's essentially what Melancholy was at the time as well, obviously, because I remember I actually went back over some old interviews and things and looked back through old articles where, Billy, you were saying that this record, Melancholy, was a real reaction to the way that you guys made Siamese Dream and how that felt at the time. You felt like the way forward was actually sort of reliving something that wasn't quite there when you made Siamese Dream. You felt like that there was the energy and the ferocity and the urgency of when you guys played live, that was somewhat lost on Siamese Dream when you recorded it. Is that right? Do you still view it that way?
Yeah, I think my version of it, and I'm curious for Jimmy's version of it. My version of it is we try to make this perfect thing of a band that didn't exist. You know, and there were a lot of reasons for that, and I'm really appreciative of that, because I think it's sort of, it's like we all have that snapshot of our youth where we look really good. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how we prefer to remember our youth, as opposed to the one where we didn't look as good. You know, there's something sort of, and Siamese Dream is that beautiful snapshot of our youth. It literally captures us in the prime of our youth in the most perfect possible way. But where Flood was smart, and what we realized was there was this other ferocity in the band that was being left aside in this pursuit of perfection. And Melancholy was a reaction to two things. One, it was a reaction to, okay, we've done perfect, now let's do imperfect, right? And then secondarily, we were so lumped in with the grunge crowd, and we kept saying, no, we're more like Led Zeppelin, or we're more like the Beatles, and no one would believe us, because it's sort of like a proof in the pudding. Like, yeah, okay, you got a couple songs, but like, you know, you're not that level of band. Like, and we were like, no, we really believe we can be that level of band. And so Melancholy was our way of saying, you'll never again be able to compare us to these other bands. Now that sounds a little bit childish, speaking from where I'm sitting in my life at this point, but at the time, that's the way I felt. It was like, you're not going to compare this band to any other band. Like you compare us to bands from other generations. Yeah. As far as our generation, we really, I still believe it, we really kind of are a band without compare. I mean, there are other artists that have endeavored, like Bob Pollard comes to mind, of somebody who's really delved deep, you know, and gone wide into their catalog and their songwriting and stuff like that. But as far as a popular band, a mainstream band, I mean, our generation, there's nobody who's covered as much ground. And that was like a mission statement for us. Like, and that was within the band. That wasn't just me. And like I said, I'd love to hear Jimmy's take on it, because we really felt like, no, you cannot compare us. There's just no way. Because we were, at that time, we were going on play 2.5, 3 hour shows, you know what I mean? You know, we do acoustic, and we were doing, like, we're doing everything, you know, like, and then you go to see somebody else's set and they play 80 minutes and they just play all the hits and kind of just stand there. And we were like, no, that's just not who we are. But the press kind of kept putting that on us. So it was like our way of saying, fuck you, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. I think Siamese Dream is kind of that glossy, you know, glossy Polaroid that you look at fondly and say, you know, wow, I have my shit together. But even though we may not have, but it certainly sounds that way. But yeah, Melancholy was really an adventure in the breadth of the band, and really getting into, you know, widening those parameters as far as we could. And, you know, what sticks out to me is, you know, working on songs like Cupid de Loc and then working on songs like Jelly Belly in the same day, right? And you realize, you'd be like, what band am I in, right? Or like, how can we be doing like To Forgive in one moment and then be working on Bullet, you know, 2 hours later? I mean, you realize that the delta between those types of songs is huge, and more so, that's what I really started to, you know, sink my teeth into about the band, was it challenged me to be a multitude of drummers in any given moment. You know, I had to play extremely delicate on one track and really utilize a lot of my, you know, even polka drumming or jazz drumming forbearance to work on those songs. And then, you know, to have to play these kind of blistering rock songs in the same day, it was super exciting. And, you know, I think that's what I think is really the difference between us and everybody else, is the breadth and the width of the music and the parameters. And that's really what we're going for. Again, we really find that there's a lot of gold in those hills with those wide parameters, and we really enjoy the challenge of creating music in many different forms, right? when I listen to that record now, I'm just like, it's just amazing to me that our thoughts could go from that heavy to that soft and quiet without and still maintain such a strong identity, right? I mean, the fact that any one of those songs you can put them on and it sounds like the Pumpkins. It doesn't sound like us trying to be a soft band or us trying to be, you know, a beats type of band or a rock band. It all sounds like us, which is pretty remarkable for the width of the music.
Yeah, I agree. To go from you know, the opening track to something like XYU, where it's just so ferocious, and you have these moments where there's the total push and pull that could only happen with people in the room together. You know, not just with the tempo, but like the way it's so ferocious at the end, and the tuning is like just so wayward and visceral. It's incredible. Sorry, I was getting a little excited.
No, I know. No, it is, and it was a wild pony ride. You know, it's like I think Jimmy and I sometimes we sit around and go, did we really do all that? You know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we did. Like I listened to Jelly Belly not too long ago, and it's like, oh my God, these people sound like they're insane. You know, it literally sounds like just pure adrenaline.
Yeah.
And the overdubbing and just all of it. And if you ask me, like, what's your memory? My memory is it seemed normal. You know what I mean? Like when you're in it, it's just like, oh yeah, this is what we do. I'll tell you a quick funny story that I don't think I've told, but maybe I. So the song, you know, we were way behind. The album was way delayed. The label was screaming at us because they had made this big announcement, and they, you know, was like, you know, typical like fourth quarter, got to get the product out, all that shit, right? So we were 2.5 months behind. I mean, they were screaming at us to hurry up and finish, you know, and you know, it was like, can't you just do less songs and all that type of stuff? So I had to do a bunch of overdubs because I was focused on, you know, all the other stuff, you know, keyboards, vocals, and so the last minute overdubs on the record, I think I did in about 4 days. I got all the guitar overdubs on Ruby, I think I did in 4 hours. I mean, that's like how far we were behind. So imagine you work on an album for 8 months from start to finish, and you're literally like, I got 4 hours to do like, and I think I did 40 overdubs in 4 hours. It was just total insanity, right? So here's the apotheosis of the story. So on the song "Fuck You" and "Ode to No One," there's that sort of really super vicious guitar solo. Now, you would think, okay, you know, crank it up, do the solo, pick the best one and move on. No, I got it in my head that I wanted to throw the guitar at the amplifier at the end of the solo. This is a crazy person thinking, right? So imagine you tune the guitar, you crank the speakers up to like concert volume. You got to play like, you know, What Was My Hair on Fire, you know, like total insanity. And then at the end of the take, I have to throw the guitar at the amplifier to get that sound too. This is all pre-Pro Tools too, right? So I would do it, and then we'd be like, what do you think? Like, could be better. Tune it up, play the solo. We lost somebody. You there, Jimmy?
Yeah.
We'll just talk for Daniel. Yeah. Do you remember any of that? Oh, there, you're back, Daniel. We lost you for a second.
Oh, sorry.
So you know, I mean, like, again, I have no time. People are screaming, hurry up. But I've got to literally throw the guitar, like, so you get the sound of the. So if you listen to the track, you literally hear, like, that was the good one. Wow. I'll tell you a quick funny story. It has nothing to do with us. We were working with the great producer, Roy Thomas Baker, on our album Zeitgeist. And I said something about throwing a piano off a building and recording it. And Roy goes, oh, I did that. And so I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, I was working with this band and they got this idea to throw a piano up. Everyone's frozen. I'm the only one talking. Anyone there?
I can hear you.
Yeah, we're still here.
I can hear you.
I'm back. You're back. Oh, okay. I lost you and I get scared. Anyway, so Roy said, yeah, I once recorded a band who wanted to throw a piano off a building, and we recorded it. And so Jimmy was in the room. We go, what does it sound like? He goes, oh, it was terrible. So he said the actual sound of throwing a piano off the building wasn't as good as you thought it would be. So then they had to hit it with hammers and pretend it was falling off the building. So my point is the sound of throwing a guitar at an amp, like you think like, oh, it'll sound, no, it doesn't necessarily translate. It sounds like something's going wrong. So you got to get the right version of throwing the guitar at the amplifier at the end of the blistering guitar pick.
Amazing. So, so amongst all this chaos, you had like a real, the thematic element to the album was very specific. Can we talk about that a little bit? Can you tell me about that? And how, I mean, we can talk. Well, as I understand it, that it's the album can be viewed as the course of a day. Yeah. In Zero's life.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about that. I mean, I'm probably off on the wrong tangent, but I know that there's obviously a very kind of a mystical element, shall we say, to what you do. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that? Because I look at across the albums and especially on Machina as well. There's there's references to alchemy. There's references to all these like hermetic ideas and esoteric ideas. And I was trying to work out, like, when I started thinking about the course of the day and the main character in particular of Zero, I started thinking about tarot and how the Zero card is the fool, who is the person that's about to go off onto this journey, that's stood at the edge of the precipice waiting to go into the abyss. I mean, I don't know if that's
I think that's no, it's beautiful the way you put it. No, I think if everyone will indulge me for a second, if you just think of one day, the rising of the sun, the setting of the sun, the moon waxing or waning, in that one cycle of the one day, you can find an analogy for an entire life.
Yeah.
Or a romance, the sun rose and the sun set, you can find it. So within the course of a single day, a symbolic day, you can find everything in life that you need to find. A conversation can hint at spirituality. A bad phone call can hint at a lost love, So it's sort of an idealized day of what this one person is going through. And that era was particularly intense for all of us. I was going through the beginning stages of a breakup of marriage. There were drugs involved. It was all sorts of that stuff. So the album hints at sort of everything I'm going through in a kind of a loose conceptual way. And I feel like somehow I got it all in. And if you want to go further, you can say the B-sides as well, kind of are there extensions of those same thematics. Yeah. For example, there's a song called God, which we ended up not putting on the album. It's one of the Melancholy B-sides. It's kind of got a bullet type beat. It's like Jimmy heavy on the toms, God's, I can't remember the lyrics, but it's similar to the idea of God is empty, just like me from Zero. It's like somebody wrestling with the idea of God, but in this case, it's not a serene spiritual take. It's a 25-year-old brain on they're angry at God. They don't understand the world. They don't understand themselves in it. Like, what are you asking of me? There's a line like in the song God, it's like, it's all too much or something. You know what I mean? It's just like what is this? What is life? What is God? What is a day? The point is, if you work symbolically, you can kind of take anything the way you want it.
Yeah. But so you've gone into all of this. I mean, as I'm sure we'll get into with Machina, is that those two fit together, and obviously all the extra parts to which, like the airplane flies high with Melancholy as one sort of section of this triptych, and then the two parts of Machina are the second part of the triptych, and obviously.
Well, not to overly confuse anybody with my Tolkien-like world, but in my mind, it's all conceptual. The only difference is that Melancholy, Machina, and sorry,
I
is
can
everyone
hear
still there? Yeah, sorry. The only difference is that Melancholy, Machina, and the album we're working on now were written from a conceptual base. I know that's a bit of a strange distinction, but like there's a story in mind that knits them together. Where the other albums, like Adore is just as conceptual, but it's more like an inward rumination or something.
Yeah.
If you wanted to make a movie out of all of it, you could, because it is in essence me portraying my own personal journey through various characters. But you know, the band members show up, you know, in these things too. The people in my life show up in these things too. If anyone's ever read F. Scott Fitzgerald, you know, his books are fictional, but much of what he wrote about actually happened to him. And I think that's kind of the position that I take. My musical work is fiction, and it is heightened reality, but most of the things that I write about are from my own experiences. I always appreciate somebody who can be somebody else. Like some of the Bob Dylan songs where he'll start like, you know, or Neil Young, like I'm a miner and I'm down in the coal mine. They're like, I could never be, I can only be whatever these characters are. I don't have the ability to say or Bruce Springsteen, you know. In 1952, I was working on the rail line. I don't have that ability. I feel really weird when I do it, but I like people who can do it to me.
Yeah. But
so
then
somehow
do you not think that people get that, what you get from those songs, people get that from yours, obviously, and with the idea of Zero and Glass being these characters, but also aspects of yourself, essentially.
Well, I'm not complaining, but I will say that, and it started on Siamese Dream, people so overly identify me with the fictional character that I'm playing on my albums that they think I'm that guy. And that's kind of weird. We don't have to go into all that, because to me, it's actually kind of boring, but it's amazing to me that I've been able to convince people that I was the Siamese Dream guy, that I was Zero, that I was these characters, that I was the guy in Machina.
Yeah.
You know, well, what's the big mag in the UK that recently went out of business? It was like the big music magazine.
Enemy? Well, Enemy is now online.
No, but it was a magazine. It wasn't Enemy. It was one of the other ones.
Kerrang?
No, but they just went out of business recently. It doesn't matter. But point is like during Machina, they printed an article on me, and they said the rudest man in rock. You know, the journalist wasn't sophisticated enough to understand that I was playing a character. But now everybody accepts this. It's like weird. Like somehow it's normal that people play characters, but at the time,
yeah.
And because I've been identified as such, people have a lot of beliefs about me from playing these characters, but I'm not actually that person. I mean, of course, it identifies aspects of my personality. Like I used to say, people love like, for example, here's an example that everyone understands. We used to portray on purpose a dysfunctional band. Go watch our old interviews. We would play dysfunctional in the interviews, but we weren't dysfunctional.
Wow. No, I get it though, but I think the thing is
and this is what my point is, how can we make an album like Melancholy where we recorded over 50 songs that we were so dysfunctional? I would literally have these conversations with journalists. They go, well, you guys are so dysfunctional. I'm like, how do we just put out 50 songs? They're like, I don't know, but you're sure are dysfunctional. So we played up these personalities in public because we thought it was kind of amusing and entertaining. Now we did have our own dysfunction. That's not to say we didn't, but it wasn't what people thought it was. It's kind of funny, right?
Yeah, because I think it's easier to accept people playing characters within other art forms because it is the norm. It's expected, or more so. It's easier for people to go, okay, I get it. This is the artist. This is the character. But I guess within music, and especially in the sense that those records have connected with people so much, there's their own they're so invested in it, it's harder to make that separation.
Well, here's what I would say, and I say this from my heart to everybody. I never would have been able to make that music if I didn't play the character. I'm not strong enough to be that guy. I wish I had had the courage to be myself, but I didn't. So I had to, like, and this is something I talk about a lot about with people who've been through a lot of abuse. You have to almost kind of distance yourself because you can't handle it. And that was my way of handling it, was to distance myself. Just give me enough breathing room to say, well, they're criticizing him, they're not criticizing me. You know what I mean? They're criticizing the character. That's okay. I can deal with that.
Yeah.
And there are, you know, if anybody knows about phase in music, you know, where two signals phase and it creates like a sound. There are moments, and of course, you know, my good friend Marilyn Manson, there are moments where there is a phase between Brian Warner and Marilyn Manson, like who is who. Well, there's been many phases between Billy Corgan and these various characters. It's like, sometimes I wonder, but I can tell you on a daily basis, the guy that everybody thought I wasn't the guy writing the songs. I mean, ask Jimmy. He was in the room with me for God knows how many years. You know what I mean? We were very, very serious and very, very focused on what we did. Our workflow, you know, in 2020 is almost identical to what it was before. We literally just go and we just work. There's like, you know, there's no beer, there's no groupies, there's no pills, there's nothing. We just would go in and work. We're like college students or something, like nerdy over our abacuses. So what do you think, JC? I'm curious for your take, because you were there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you know, it was even mystifying to me at some time when, you know, there was, you know, less disparity between the character and you. I mean, I've seen it live, you know, many, many times, and obviously you've seen it with me. I mean, you know, I played many characters back in those days as well. And it was tough not to, just because, to your point, I mean, it was one way of insulating ourselves from, you know, exposure, right? And it was really a safe space to, you know, live within the context of those characters, to protect, you know, the innocent inside of us from, you know, all the brutality that was going on. But it's still remarkable to me to watch, you know, even today on a daily basis, because obviously, you know, we're super close friends. We've known each other for many, many years. We know things about each other that only we know. And it still amazes me to watch you, you know, channel the stuff from God knows where. I mean, knowing that our conversations, you know, about the Cubs or baseball or whatever we're talking about can shift on a dime to, you know, this super intense music. It's pretty interesting, and still is, and still, to your point, very remarkable, kind of the separation between, you know, me and you in the band. I think there's still a delineation where, you know, even for me, I mean, to operate within the context and the architecture of the band, you know, I have to play a certain character as well. I mean, I'm not that organized and focused in my normal life, even in my studio with my normal practicing, but somehow in the band we hold ourselves to a higher ideal, and that seems to bear fruit. And it's been, you know, it's been a blessing. I mean, and it's been something that we've been able to kind of model, you know, the fragmentation and the rest, the peripheral of our lives too. But yeah, I mean, I mean, to your point, there's nothing to do right now but work, right, and be creative. There's no other gear. So for us, it's kind of, I won't say that it's been a blessing, but it's a unique time to have all this space to kind of go and create in, and really, you know, try to use it to the best of our ability.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the things why I love the band so much. You know, there are certain bands that I hold in such high esteem because, you know, people go, oh, it's the chemistry between the band members. But I do feel it is more of an alchemical thing. And I do believe that there is this this thing that music takes on a life of its own. I mean, you could look at it from a literary point, like, I don't know, like Geisen and Burroughs and The Third Mind, and how it becomes its own thing when everybody works together. And I think that's one of the things that makes the band so special, for me anyway.
Thank you.
No,
Yeah,
it's definitely.
go ahead,
Go ahead.
JC. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's definitely, you know, it's definitely rooted in some type of transmutation. You know, and I found that with a lot of great music, you know, that the process becomes the philosopher's stone, and you do go through some type of transmutation in the journey.
Yeah.
I think, you know, Billy and I, we live in that world so much that I don't think we don't see the uniqueness in it until we start to talk about it in a context like this, where you're really forced to articulate it. And then you can kind of see the delineation between kind of the normal, the perceived normal and the real normal. But yeah, for us, it happens, it's kind of our natural state these days. And really, you know, back when we were doing Melancholy or Machina, we'd get into that natural state of transmutation where my wife and I listened to Machina not too long ago and just put it on. And I hadn't listened to it probably in 8-10 years. And I really felt like I was watching a movie with some other person starring in it, right? Because it's almost like an out-of-body experience birthing those parts. You're kind of rising above the drum set and watching somebody create this stuff, but it's you, but it's not you. You're emoting things that are inside you, but you're doing it in a way that you either are not cognizant of possession of those things, or they only come out in certain harmonics, right? When there's certain other harmonics in the room. So I found, you know, certainly my work with Billy over the years has definitely been of the highest ideal emotionally. And even like technically, we like, to his point about Melancholy, we had so many songs to do. We weren't really consumed with technical proficiency. We were more consumed with, like, how does it feel? And is it supporting the narrative in a way that's congruent with where we all need to get to? Is it congruent with the destination? Are we all pointed in the same direction? The rest of the stuff, you know, was kind of, we only had so much time, so there was a limiting factor in how many performances we could do. But yeah, certainly on Machina, when I go back and listen to that stuff, it sounds like there's an ethereal quality to it that I love that space. I love that person who created that music, and I really I don't take lightly those situations anymore, having experienced both the birthing of it and the re-listening.
Yeah, and listening with fresh ears, almost stepping back and actually appreciating it from
and listening with my
perspective.
and listening with my wife, right, who I hadn't even, when I met, and Billy will tell you, like, when we made Machina, me getting married and having 2 kids and sitting on a school board was like, that was not like in the game plan. Like, that guy was, that was not going to happen to the guy who was playing those drums, right? And then, you know, to have this other kind of seismic shift later in my life, which, you know, I'm healthy, I'm happily married, 19 years, I have 2 kids, you know, and still making this type of music. It becomes kind of more interesting. Is like, what's the nucleus of all this? Is it the music? Is it the life journey? Is it the commitment to the instrument? Is it the accountability to this kind of you know, self path, or is it all of the above? But again, I mean, it gets into a very, you know, alchemical architecture when you talk about, like, what is it all about? And the easiest way to put it is it's really rooted in this kind of transmutation that encompasses everything, whether you're talking about your kids or your music. You know, it's not anything else but that.
Sorry.
That's okay. I want to add something grandiose. It does cycle back to Melancholy. in my opinion, the band's the greatest thing that ever happened to us. Like, us as individuals, all four of us, we never would have achieved that without the band. It's the band, even the silly name, everything, it forced something out of us, and we forced something out of each other that never would have happened. And Melancholy is the absolute peak of what that band had within it. You know, it's pretty crazy that on a fly, you know, the same people that were like doing live takes at full volume, you know, throwing guitars and amplifiers, made a record that went on to be one of the biggest selling albums of all time. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
But it also shattered us, because it shattered the illusions of what we also weren't with one another. And what's incredible, and if you've ever been through something incredibly intense, like in my case, watching my partner Chloe have 2 children, you know, like, you know, home birth, you know, no drugs, like the intensity of that, and all respect to mothers for going through that. A peak experience in life. Melancholy was the peak experience of that band's existence, and the diamonds and the rocks and the coal that came from the splintering apart that followed, and what it did to us has everything to do with what followed, more good than bad. But the beautiful thing is, it could have only happened by us cracking through that other level. You know,
yeah.
If anybody wants to be super cynical, and many are, many people will point and say, well, Melancholy was like sort of the, you know, the peak of what you guys ever did and will ever do. I don't agree with that, but okay, let's agree with that just for a second. That going through to that other level, that crazy level that only a few artists will ever achieve, you know, I don't even know how to explain it. It's like, there is no other mountain. You're on top of that mountain, whatever that mountain is for your time. It does something. It changes your life. It changes you forever. It changes your band forever. And the fantastic thing is, we went for it. We got there. And like Icarus, too close to the sun, well, it destroyed us, you know? And so that's why I always have a bit of a mixed feeling about the record. I love the record, but it's also, I also know how that movie ends.
Yeah.
And everything that's happening to us now could only have happened because we went through that. I think if we went on to be, you know, popular like some bands are popular, or loved like certain bands are loved, and I don't mean we're not loved, I mean loved in a way where like there's no controversy, there's no guy in the corner sort of throwing stones. In essence, the contentious nature of the Smashing Pumpkins is an institution. That has everything to do with why we're still able to make great music. Because we had to go like a trial by fire. We put ourselves through the fire. We came out the other end, and even though it may have taken 25 years to sort of get our shit together, I can't speak for Jimmy, but I don't want to say I wouldn't change a thing, but it's like, it's the only way it could have happened.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you talk about transmutation. It's like, you know, you got to go through the Lord of the Rings moment. You have to decide to throw the ring into the fire. Well, we threw the ring into the fire, and we saw what happens. You know, it's what I'm saying is, it's beautiful. I'm encouraging everybody that in this tough time, like as we're going through this tough time, take advantage of that. Like, come out the other side, transform your life, transform yourself, transform your partner, transform your community, make a better world. You know, you can always change adversity. You can go through the fire and come out the other side. And that's what that record is for us. Machina is us losing our minds. You know what I mean? Like we're in there with Gollum at that point, but that's part of the story.
Yeah, I hear that. I think it's funny as well, as you were saying about being at the crest of a mountain, and then mentioning the whole thing almost being like a movie and knowing how it ended. It just made me think of the way that the album ends with Farewell and Goodnight. It's almost the way it's all the players step forward and sing their part. It feels almost like it's almost breaking a fourth wall, like, you know, like at the end of Holy Mountain when he's like, camera, pull back, and it zooms out, and you see the whole thing, the whole journey has just been this this story that you've been invited into. That's how the record kind of feels. I was thinking about that.
Yeah. Well, James wrote this beautiful lullaby that was kind of half finished, and I finished the other half, and I said, oh, this is the perfect way to end. And then I had to talk everybody into the band and into singing on the track. So it's the only track, I believe, there might be one more, but where we all sing on the track, and you get to hear Jimmy sing a lead, you know, some of the lead vocal and stuff. And you're right. It was our way of saying, kind of, we know what that's what's frustrating. And I don't want to bring too much personal animus into it, but what's frustrating is we said all along that's who we were. But because it doesn't sort of work the way rock and roll works, people would sort of, they want to ignore the fact that we said the whole time that we were pranksters. You know what I mean? There is no, and people get crazy when I say this stuff. There is no Smashing Pumpkins. It's a creation. It's like, it is whatever we want it to be. It's like, who is Monty Python? You know what I mean? It's like, there is no Smashing Pumpkins. It's like, it's no different than your kids when they put on costumes and suddenly they're in Paw Patrol or something. You know what I mean? Would you say they're not having a real experience? But they are. For that 5 minutes they are. Well, that's us. We were totally middle class suburban kids. You know what I mean? And we have our backstories and, you know, the horrible things and the good things that happened. We were just like four schlubs who came together, and somehow I was like, hey, I got this idea. You know, we're going to be like this type of band. And everyone was like, okay, cool. I don't think any of us thought it was going to turn into what it turned into. It was like a weird magic machine. The more we fed into it, the more we got out of it, the bigger it got. We were like, okay, let's make it stranger. So we turned up the strange dial. You know, we got louder, we got faster, we got crazier. We had the ability to, you know, we would go see some heavy metal band. We're like, well, we can do that. And we would just play heavy metal. It was like, it wasn't a big deal to us. And then the heavy metal people would get mad at us because they said, you're making fun of heavy metal.
Wow.
You know, people would get mad at us for taking the piss, and they would talk about how serious I was. It's like, well, which one is it? Which is it? How about both? How about both?
Yeah. No, I hear that.
Just to put a capstone on that, to me, and I used to say this in the band, and I'd love to hear Jimmy's take on the memory of it. I used to say to the band, this is the only uncharted territory left in rock and roll, is to turn it upside down, is to invert it. Like, Jimmy and I love Rainbow, and we love Deep Purple, and we love Led Zeppelin. But that era was all about, I am who I am on stage. You know what I mean? True or not. That was, we are thundering gods. You know what I mean? Robert Plant talks about it, right? You know what I mean? Like, even when Beatles went through their transformations, you really believed they were that guy for that year. We were like, no, the only way to move forward is to just break it all. Just break it all. Like, destroy everything. So we would go into an interview. It happened a lot during the Melancholy year, where we would pretend to be the thing they wanted us to be, and as they did the interview, we just kept turning up the volume so you could see the interviewer getting more and more uncomfortable, because we just kept saying more and more fucked up stuff.
Yeah.
Because you're breaking the rules, right? You're not supposed to do that. You know, like, you know, how'd you guys make a record? Oh, you know, we just got together and, you know, we worked hard and, you know, we hope the fans like it. Bands don't talk like that. Bands talk about what they're going to have for dinner and who they're going to have sex with after the show. You know what I mean? So it's all a contrivance. So our thing was like, well, let's just invert the contrivance outside. You know, like, invert the out and outvert the in.
Yeah.
So I'm saying Melancholy was the peak of that, like, that pranksterism, and it worked. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like we were in on the joke, and the audience was in on the joke, and great. Like, everybody had a good time. Until they did.
Well, I'm conscious of time, and I know that there's there's been a bunch of questions that have been sent in, and do you want to move on to those, or do you want to talk about the concept of the live show that you want to do for the Melancholy shows and Machina?
You there, JC?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm here.
You hear me? You hear me?
I'm here.
I can hear you.
Hello.
Sorry. So would you like to, shall I field questions, or would you like to talk about the stage show? Because I know that you've said the idea is now, obviously, there's a lot of bands will go out and they'll be like, oh, it's this is the show about this album, and it will be like, we're going to play the album in full, all the songs, and maybe some other songs from that era. But as I understand it already, this isn't that. What you're proposing, what it's going to be, is going to be a much more theatrical show, where the narratives across those records are played out, and the band will be within those moments at times, and the other times you'll be playing songs from that era. Is that correct?
Yeah. Ideally, we would have a multitude of voices, hopefully some special guests, things like that. So we would perform a variety of music from the era, but in a way that was constructed like a show, and then there would be a narrative in terms of how it would be produced. If anybody saw the Shiny tour, there would be visuals, there would be movies, there would be, so you would get kind of a holographic experience of the narrative of the album through the show. And so we would obviously play, I'm sure we're going to play the songs that people know, but we would pick the songs that best identify the narrative. Technically speaking, we could play any song from the era and it would fit the narrative, but we would probably just pick what made for the best show. This is something we've talked about for years and years and years, you know, and because even when everybody started doing playing the album thing, I just kept saying, I'm never going to do that. I didn't make those albums to be that.
Yeah, of course. I remember when Kate, I don't know, this is a thing that I'm just thinking about, but when Kate Bush did the Before the Dawn tour, it was a similar thing where it felt much more like you were going to a theater experience, where the songs were woven amongst the narrative and the sets were moving and changing, and there were moments where there would be acting and where the narrative would take precedence, and then the songs would come in to almost soundtrack that. And that's kind of, I don't know, that's how I interpreted what you were saying. It was
it's fairly accurate. And Linda Strawberry and I were already even in pre-production meetings when COVID hit. So we were already mapping out how the tour was going to be produced. So I have some sense of how I want to do it. I mean, we were talking about pyro, and I mean, it was full on, you know. I don't want to give it away because I would want to wait till I stage it and all that, because it's obviously very complicated to do that. Just for the Shiny tour alone, I think the band rehearsed 6 weeks with the production.
Yeah, those shows were fantastic. I saw a few.
Thank you.
Yeah, the Forum shows, I went to both those, and it just was, it was mind blowing.
Yeah, so it'd be really fun to do it. You know, very focused on a particular set of themes, you know, because with the Shiny tour, not everybody knew what they were going to get, you know what I mean? And we were playing songs from all eras, so, well, obviously 90s, but this would be very, very targeted. Like, if you're a fan of this record, you're going to get like the full 3-dimensional experience of that record through the show, in a way that if you just came and saw us play the record versus what we're going to do, this is going to be 10 times more intense and exciting. Amazing. And fun.
I look forward to it.
Me too.
Yeah, well, yeah, I hear that. I'm going to go to some of these questions, if that's cool.
Sure, please do.
Okay. I don't have the names of the people that have sent in the questions, unfortunately, so I apologize. Was there a song that was particularly difficult to crack during the writing and recording process, or one that came together unusually quickly and easily? Thank you for providing us with decades of amazing music.
Oh, thank you. JC, you want to tackle that one?
I remember showing up every day and trying to play Jelly Belly. So every day we would show up, at least when we were kind of trying to record that song, or when we were recording that song, we would show up and knew that we had about 2.5 times in each member that could play that song before they were gassed, right? So at least for me, I mean, the song was just so physical. I remember going and like, okay, first thing, before anybody eats, before anybody does anything, let's take a crack at this song. that's kind of how we got that one. But I think, you know, we worked so hard on the languaging part that a lot of the stuff that was that you would think, you know, was difficult came together pretty quickly. Like I remember like Tonight, I remember the drum part came together pretty quickly. The arrangement took a while, but the components of the song came together pretty quickly, for how kind of complex and how many movements that song has. But yeah, again, I mean, I think it's hard to say, like, you know, what was the hardest song. I mean, Jelly Belly was obviously for me probably one of the most difficult recordings I've ever done, and still, like, to play that song live is crazy, right? When I listen to the speed of the song. And funny story, so I got pitched to go to play at the School of Rock thing with Earl Slick from David Bowie's band. And so Earl, we were going to play some of Earl's songs, and the deal was the kids could pick 3 songs from each artist's history, and then you'd show up and play the song. So we played like Diamond Dogs and a couple other Bowie songs, and then the kids sent me the pumpkin list, and it was Cherub Rock, Geek USA, and Jelly Belly. So I remember as soon as I got the email, like my hands started sweating, and immediately went down to my studio to see if I could play it again. And it literally took me about 5 days of working on it to get it up to the tempo. But yeah, I mean, just a ton of work. And with those things, like when you're in the zone with that stuff, it's like you're already kind of like, even now when Billy and I are working, I mean, we're so closely tied together. We're kind of finishing each other's sentences, you know, anyway, when you're kind of working that closely together. And I mean, we work really quickly. We work, you know, we kind of think the same way. So a lot of the things that you think take a long time really don't dictate a lot of discussion. We just kind of do them.
Yeah. Well, I think having that language amongst musicians is what, you know, as I said, I'm not going to keep saying that's what sets you apart. But I did hear that 1979 very nearly didn't make the record. Is that right?
That's true.
When you were doing that?
Yeah.
What was the it was one of those songs where we kept saying, oh, this is a really good song, and we kept putting off recording it. And so then it became time. We'd actually moved downtown to Chicago recording studios, and in this horrible room in there, and I remember playing it, and it sounded like the Stones, and I go, this sounds like the Rolling Stones, but not the good version. Like it's like the bad, like Keith on a bad day. And you know, it's hard because and I say this with respect to my partner here, you know, there are times where it's like what's needed, you know, it's not his fault that what he's offering doesn't work. You know what I mean? Like he's playing the beat. We all agree that's the beat, and somehow it sounds like bad Stones, you know? So then we put off the song again, and then we literally had 1 day left in recording. And Flood said to me, tomorrow's the day. If we don't record this song tomorrow, it's off the record. And I was like, oh shit, because I kind of felt it was a good song. So I went home that night and I spent a lot of time like totally figuring out what I wanted from the song. I came in the next day. First thing is I went in the other studio where we were working. We had 2 studios going at the same time because we're always late. I recorded an acoustic demo, which you can hear on the Melancholy box set. And then we went in that day and we did the version that everybody knows, all in that 1 day. And that was it. That's the version. Somehow it ended up being this kind of mixture of whatever it is and craft work and, you know, whatever else. But yeah, we had to do like the Bad Stones version to go, no, this needs something else. And that became part of what makes the song so special was we failed. And through our failure and like somebody like Jimmy's willingness to go, yeah, whatever we got to do to make it work, I don't care. You know, you want to use drum machines, you want to loop me in, great, all good by me. And that's why Jimmy's such a great partner. It's like whatever's best for the song. And we wouldn't have that song if we didn't have that willingness to take a chance and just throw it at the wall and see what happened. Amazing. Okay, Another question: how difficult was it to prepare the track listing for the album, given the volume of songs available? And is there a particular song that you have regrets over for leaving out?
That's a great question. You know, Flood, the producer, his taste dictated a lot of what did make the record and didn't make the record. We were very partial to songs like Mouths of Babes and Set the Rate of Jerry. And I think if we'd left the track listing up to ourselves, those songs probably would have been on the record. And they did, you know, they didn't. But another example is Flood really liked the song Cherry. And I was like, it's not good enough to be on the record. And now I think he was probably right. It probably should have been on the record. Hard to say. But what Flood and I would do is we would make running orders, because we were worried about that. We would make running order tapes, cassettes back in the day, and we'd get in my my used Mercedes, and we'd drive down Lakeshore Drive, you know, the beautiful drive down the lake here in Chicago, and we would just listen to the record at full volume and just go, that one's, you know, like a little slow, a little fast. And so we were pre-tweaking the order and the vibe early. So I really give him credit for that, because it wasn't a last second thing. Like it was part of the process the whole time.
Yeah, because the track listing does vary across the different formats as well, right?
Kind of, yeah, but that was just me messing with people's heads, you know. Just having a laugh.
Okay. I've always been interested in Melancholy as a sonic foiled Siamese dream. From the first single, Bullet with Butterfly Wings, I remember thinking, wow, this sounds different. What efforts were made to ensure that the sonic paradigm shift, but also keep the band on brand, for lack of a better term, is one of the questions.
You know what? I don't think we really talked about it. I think Flood's main goal was to try to capture the band's live sound. So we just would set up in our studio. We had a kind of a rehearsal studio where we did a lot of the recording for the record. We would just set up and play at full volume. And so what you hear is mostly our live band sound. There wasn't like a lot of tweaking. It was kind of like, this is the sound. And I guess to the spirit of the question, when we went out and tried to play Siamese Dream with the same type of sound as Siamese Dream, it sounded terrible. The fuzz pedals didn't connect at all. We actually did a few shows where we tried to actually recreate the sound, and it was a disaster. So the live equipment that we had was our closest estimation to the Siamese Dream sound, but in a way that sounded good live. And then we went out and toured for, I think, 14 months. So the equipment that we were using, the drum kit he was using, the guitars I was using, they were all completely dialed in. So Flood was like, fine, I'll just have that.
Right.
So one quick funny story is Flood and I would have these technical arguments, and I have this theory for anybody who's a guitar player, that if you have a guitar head, the speaker jack that's closest to the electrical power source sounds better than the other speaker jack. Speaking of, like, say, Marshalls. And okay. Flood said, you know, I don't know what you guys say over there, you know, you're having a laugh, or I don't know, something like that, right? And we literally did tests. We did like blindfold tests, and I won. Like, and Flood's, you know, one of the great ears in the world as far as listening. And so our time was more spent on technical, like, okay, this is the sound, can we make it just a little bit better? And because we were playing at full volume, we started using they call them speaker caskets or something, where you put a full 4x12 in, you can close it, so you can play at full volume, get the sound. So part of the sound of that is that a lot of the guitar sounds were recorded in this kind of almost like a little mini cave
enclosure.
Yeah, it's a different sound in that. It almost sounds a little bit muffly, but also kind of like claustrophobic. So that became part of the sound. Like, we just got used to it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to keep going through these questions, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah.
Okay. With the more visual accompaniments now accepted, would you ever elaborate visually on the story told throughout the songs on Melancholy? It always seemed like a soundtrack to something that didn't quite yet exist.
Beautiful question. I think that's kind of what you were hinting at with the tour. The tour will codify the languaging of the record. Because I did have very intense visual languaging in my head for all the music, and I think you could hear it in the lyrics. The lyrics are pretty descriptive. There's a one line about like bumblebee kiss in a barbed wire mouth, or, you know, it's like all that shit. It's like, it was all in my head like that. You know, I saw that. So
Yeah.
it would be great to put all that up on a screen as best we can to kind of bring that, the visual experience in, because it is in the record.
Yeah. Well, there's another question that I guess is saying the same thing, which was, I always thought Melancholy deserved its own animation or graphic novel. Was that ever a consideration? And would you consider a more visualized story once the third albums of the Melancholy and Machina series is released?
Yes, in fact, I want to do, I was hopeful, although I'm losing hope, to do a graphic novel for the Machina reissue that we're working on now. I would love to do graphic novels for Melancholy, Machina, and then the record we're working on now. It'd be fantastic to tell the, I just haven't found the right artist.
Yeah. Is that something that you're, are you well into that world? Do you know?
No, I don't. And that's part of the problem. You know, I don't know the world well. And you know, I'm not complaining, but like anytime you stumble into a world you don't know anything about, it's like there's all these rules. So, you know, you contact somebody who you think style you really like, and it's like, oh well, there's rules and the thing and this, and it's like, oh god, this is a headache. Like, I can't. Like, can we just draw some pictures, you know? But I suppose that they would have the same attitude if they just call me up and say, can't we just make some music, you know?
Yeah.
I just understand the world enough to understand what I'm asking somebody for, because every time I ask them for that, they look at me like I'm asking them to build the Empire State Building.
Well, that's why the band's so special, because that can be interpreted, I guess. When you guys get together, that the other people in the room are the people that can understand that.
That's why I will always, you know, pay tribute to my band members in that sense. They trusted me to when I would talk like this, they'd go, okay. Where everybody before that and many people afterwards tell me I'm fucking nuts. I think just to entertain everyone. Imagine being in a band as successful as the Smashing Pumpkins, with all that conceptual base, with all that visual material, with all the things that we did, and then play with musicians afterwards and talk like I talk to Jimmy still, and they look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm like, but I've done it, like, you know what I mean? Like, this is just the way I work. Like, they almost think there's some other way to do it, and I'm like, but this is the way I do it. There isn't another way for me. I can't speak to everybody else. Some people I know, they just want to smoke a bowl and jam against a beat. That's just not my way, you know. I'm way more conceptual in my working form. And thank God I have a partner in Jimmy and a partner in Jeff and a partner in James that I can talk crazy like this, and they go, oh, cool. Yeah, whatever. Like, whatever you want to do, dude. Like, it's cool. You know, it doesn't bother us, you know?
Wow. Here's another one. Melancholy features some of the most lush and intricate production I've ever heard on a rock record, and I always feel like I'm discovering new instrumental parts in the mix. Could you discuss the process of how you went about adding the finer details to each song? And how did you know when a song was complete versus when more can be added? But that's the eternal question of painting as well, isn't it? It's like, when do you walk away and say, this is...
Well, Jimmy touched on it because we were so out of time. I think Melancholy is probably more sparse than it would have been, because we just didn't have time. And so in many ways, like for a lot of the guitar overdubbing, I just relied on my sort of Siamese dream approach of just go until you think there it is. You know, and then when that didn't suffice, it was like strings and synthesizers and stuff like that. I don't know. It was haphazard. I like to tell you it was more organized, but it was really haphazard.
Yeah, but that's part of the beauty of it, I guess. It's getting to that point, even if
yeah, sorry to interrupt. I think, to be fair, the material was so diverse, and because we hadn't done this type of material before, we were literally, it was like running from one corner to another, always trying to solve some sort of problem. Like, for example, Jimmy, is it We Only Come Out at Night or Lily, where we use like scissors and aerosol cans, and do you remember that?
I think it was Cupid de Lock.
Right.
Where we used, we couldn't find the right percussion sound, so we ended up using like a can of Aquanet hairspray that Darcy had laying around, and some rusty scissors, and I think like a bottle of Tylenol for a shaker. But yeah, it was a lot of that stuff. But I remember when you were talking about time, I remember I just had a flashback. I remember Flood walking into the live room and just tapping his watch a lot. Remember, he would just tap his watch and kind of look at us, and we'd be like, "What?" He'd be like, "You're out of time. Like, let's get moving, right?"
Yeah.
But yeah, craziness. I mean, the memories are just kind of flooding back.
Here's another one that would be good for you, Jimmy. It says, did the other band members know and understand the full story of Zero and then Glass at the time?
I think more so with Glass. Certainly, we talked a little bit more about the conception than we did on Melancholy. Again, with Melancholy, I mean, there was just so much work to do that it was really, and again, it was kind of this body of work, but this also hyper compartmentalization of songs and really trying to focus on the task at hand. With Machina, I remember when I rejoined the band, Billy and I met in LA to talk about the recording process, and we had actually talked about the concept then, which was kind of weird because I was reading a book. I remember I was reading a book on Rosicrucianism, and he was talking about making a record about alchemy, right? So I was like, and we met at some kind of kitschy hotel and had lunch in the afternoon. And I think Billy, you guys had just played with Kiss. And we talked about that at Dodger Stadium, and then, you know, we talked a little bit about the record. So there was certainly a little bit more of a focused narrative in their performances, on at least holistically on Machina. And that's, you know, that's what's really great about the music we're making now, is that, you know, I'm being included in the story. So for me, as an emotional player, having a narrative and being cognizant of the narrative, it informs your choices, right? So when you know what the emotional destination of a song is, you're always making better choices, right? Parts or drum fills or those types of things. So I'm a very kind of, you know, narrative focused drummer. I'm really, like, even to his point about 1979, I mean, I don't have a problem with kind of mortgaging one thing to get another, as long as for the kind of betterment of the song. But yeah, I still remember that lunch. I think it was at the Mondrian Hotel, and I picked up Billy at some other hotel, and we hadn't seen each other in a lot. I remember I had gained a bunch of weight. He was super skinny. I had dyed my hair blonde. I mean, it was just like, just more insanity, right?
Yeah, I think, just jump back real quick. I think that I was very reluctant to explain the conceptual base I was working in on Melancholy, for fear that somebody would shoot it down. So I didn't really discuss it. Like, I didn't really sit the band down and say, this is why I'm wearing the Zero shirt, and this is why I'm shaving my head, and this is why I'm saying these things on stage. And I had begun playing that character on the particularly the Lollapalooza tour, where I would go after the audience every night and say a bunch of crazy shit. I still meet people in airports to this day that are still mad at me about things I said on Lollapalooza in 1994, and that's not even a joke. That's like serious. People come up, they're still mad. So I started playing that character kind of at the end of the Siamese Dream tour. We used to have this thing, and we would play this weird version of I Am One, and then I would do this rant in the middle of it, and Jimmy called it the art breakdown. And I have this memory of standing there, you know, hectoring the audience, you know, 15,000 people at, you know, in San Francisco or something, and turning around just watching Jimmy pace behind his drums nervously. So they were aware that I was onto something, and we did have some discussions when they felt I crossed the line with what I was saying, and I would explain to them, you don't understand, I'm just doing this to like create like the thing, like it's like a bit, you know, it's like Andy Kaufman. I believe what I'm saying to the extent that I'm saying things that are honest, but I wouldn't say them like this. I know that what I'm saying is going to cause a problem, you understand? And they would be like, yeah, but can we not cause a problem, you know? So there was awareness in the band that I was taking on this different kind of personality kind of thing. So I think my reluctance, some of the damage off the Lollapalooza tour, it wasn't like I was about to sit them down and say, okay, I'm going to do this conceptual thing, and here's why. I talked about it in very loose terms, like, oh, you know, it's going to be kind of like The Wall. You know, I used The Wall by Pink Floyd as an example. But I never really drilled down. And I think it also allowed me to keep it kind of vague, too, because I never had to declare it. But looking back now, I understand it was the first time I was like, no, I need to do this. Like, I need to do this in a very kind of overt way. In my mind, Siamese dream guy, right? You know, like, let's call it the pre-zero guy. Siamese dream guy, this kind of LSD infused hippie, was my way of distancing myself from like the harshness of the press and stuff like that. And even if you like look at the way I talk, like I talk even slower than I talk, like it's kind of weird. You know, I mean, I talk like kind of like this. It's like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, but I was doing something. So I was already kind of doing it, but that's when it kind of became official, like kind of in there somewhere. It kind of took me over, you know.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
It's been a wild journey ever since.
Wow.
So this is another one of the questions. Does the story of Zero and Glass and potential future new characters or character have anything to do with Sia as well? Or is it, I mean, there's another question that says a similar thing in the sense that, you know, you're working on, as we said earlier, you're working on all these different things simultaneously. Are you shifting gears and mindsets to work on each piece?
Yeah, think of it like, not a great analogy, but think of it like the show Big Brother. You can watch the stuff they put on TV, or if you really want to creep out, you can watch the webcam thing all night and watch them sleep, right? There's that bit. Okay, well, the works that go around, and this, you can even count my solo work and Zwan, they all kind of connect emotionally to the larger frame of the story. But the machine of the Melancholy and the album working on are the only times where it's like it gets declared what's happening. Okay. It'd be like if you know, you and I run into each other every once in a while, Daniel. It'd be like if you sat down and tried to explain to me everything that happened in the year since I saw you last, you'd kind of sum it up. Well, I went here and I went to Bali and I had fun and I went surfing and you know what I mean? You'd say stuff like that, right? The other music that sort of goes around is the travels. It's the various head trips. The three conceptual works are the times where I say, okay, here's what I need to say this not just in the vagary of song. I need to say this in a very specific conceptual way. The point of the work is aligned with the concept. Yeah. For example, the Shiny tour was the reemergence of the Zero character, or was it Glass? It doesn't matter, right? And the show, if you were able to understand it from that perspective, was okay. And I said this to a few of the people, including Linda. It's like, what would happen if you took the Zero character, or the Glass character, probably is a better way to say it. Like, okay, the Glass character, let's say there'd been no Zwan, no Reform Smashing Pumpkins with Zeitgeist. Let's just say that guy went out into space somewhere and came back and showed back up. What would he have to say? That's what that show was. Here's that character's take, Zero Glass. Here's his take on where he's been, what he's seen down the road. That's what that show meant. And people were confused by it because they don't, and I'm saying that negatively. I understand why they don't get it. They're not supposed to get it. It's supposed to make them feel uncomfortable. It's supposed to make them go, why is this happening?
But how do you feel about explaining that now then? Do you feel that it's a necessity to explain these things, or are you just...
Well, I'll work backwards. It's a beautiful question. The great thing about the album we're working now is you will know the narrative of the story when you get the record. So for the first time, unlike Machina, where it was like, I'm not telling you, you got to figure it out. You'll actually be able to sit and know the story before you listen to the record if you want. Some people I sure will just want to listen and then read the story. But you'll have, for the first time, you'll be able to say, here's the story, here's the music. It'll be like a movie that you know the plot before you go see the movie. That'll be your choice for the first time.
Do you regret?
But as far as the other part of your question, no. In the case of the Shiny tour, I want the audience to go, "What the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
What is this for?" That is part of the contrivance. It's a weird analogy to jump to, but just understand this. When we first started playing super heavy about 1989. Okay, so anybody who's old enough, go back to 1989 land, like guys in flannel shirts playing 3-chord replacement type songs, right? There was a little bit like Rick Rubin had recorded Trouble, who was from Chicago. There was a little bit, there was some Soundgarden, but it wasn't what it became. Okay. So imagine us 1989 wearing hippie shirts from Goodwill. We start playing fucking loud, like really fucking loud. And people would pull us aside and say, like, what is that about? We're like, what do you mean? Why you got to play so loud? They didn't understand that the physical nature of the volume was something that we had sort of figured out was necessary to get our other point across.
Yeah.
Which was actually a sensuality. So we learned in 1989 and 1991, 92 to knock between heavy riffing and soma and this kind of languid beauty. We realized that when we were able to offset the languid beauty with brutality, it created this other thing. In many ways, like lovemaking. Like lovemaking in one session of lovemaking can be overtly physical and tender, and so we kind of got into that groove in our music, and we started to realize that there was a lot of energy there that was untapped, particularly for our generation, right? So fast forward to the Shiny tour, that level of weirdness and brutality and poking you with chest is just in the band's DNA. We're super comfortable with the uncomfortability. Everybody else has a problem with it. We're actually cool with it. It's kind of weird. It's like we know we're doing something right when you feel the discomfort.
Yeah, I felt that. I mean, that first LA show, there was
laughing because he's laughing because he knows what I'm talking about.
No, I get it. Yeah, like I was saying, that first LA show that I saw, it was so, everybody was so, there were moments where it was so ferocious that it verged on being super obnoxious, and it was like incredible. I actually brought a friend from a band the next day, and I was like, you need to see this. And he was like, oh yeah, I'm meant to be doing this. And I was like, no, you need to see this. And he just walked out at the end of it and was just like, Jesus, because it was and which was the exact reaction I wanted from him. And he plays in a really heavy band, and he was just like, those moments that would flip-flop between these super tender, as you're saying, really fragile moments, to just pure obnoxious volume and everybody just ripping it was incredible. Sorry.
Yeah. No, thank you. No, that's Jimmy, you should speak to it a little bit, because I think you have the best seat in the house for what I'm talking about.
I mean, we used to talk about it as early as '89. I mean, our kind of philosophy was, we either want to have the show of our lives or go down in flames. Like, we weren't really interested in anything in the middle, right? Like, shows in the middle were kind of boring, right? We either wanted to, and that's why we would get into playing these 40, 50, 70-minute versions of Silverfuck at the end of the show that would go through these different permutations. I mean, I'd be looking out, and people would either be aghast or orgasmic, right? But it was like, both of those reactions were great, right? I mean, you just didn't want people leaving with kind of, oh, that was okay, right? Like, they either wanted to be completely humiliated, insulted, or completely overjoyed. And it was interesting because the same song would get all of those reactions across the crowd, right? And people either got it or they didn't. But you know, it took me a while in the beginning to kind of, I mean, I was probably the most suburban of anybody in the band. So, you know, I wasn't really a city, Chicago, you know, I came from like way south of the city. So it took me a while to kind of get hip to what the vibe was, but certainly now, and even with my own concerts, like that's kind of the goal, right? Just to get somebody to feel something. What they feel is really up to them, how they kind of come into the show, but we don't want to leave anybody kind of milquetoast during the show, right? But yeah, during the Shiny tour, you could really see, you know, there's these waves that would just crest over the crowd, and some of those moments were just so grand and so tender. I just don't think people are used to bands exposing themselves like that anymore. I think it's very middle of the road when you go to a concert, but to see somebody, you know, Billy up there playing piano by himself, and then, you know, playing some of the heavier rock stuff, you know, again, the breadth of the music is what kind of befuddled people, but also kind of just freaked them out a bit.
But yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. It's about people need to leave those moments and realize that it was something very special.
Yeah. So just to put a cap on it, Melancholy was the crystallization of that logic that had been formed live. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
By playing characters in public with media, by figuring out a way to push an audience left and right on any given night, then that band went in the studio and Flood said, right, I'll have that. I want that. He was the first person that ever said to us, because everybody would only focus on the pop songs. Our first managers didn't even want us to play heavy. They literally sat me down and said, you write really beautiful pop songs that girls were like, this is a quote, not from me. You write really beautiful pop songs that girls were like, just do those and you'll be a big famous star. And I said, I don't give a fuck. Okay. So Flood was the only person that ever came into our world and said, no, I want that. Whatever the fuck is that thing that, I just got chills. Whatever the fuck is the thing that thing that you guys do, that weird, creepy, dark cloud thing that you guys can do, I want that on a record. And we were like, okay, cool. That sounds good. That sounds fun.
You're the guy for the job. Yeah.
Yeah. Fuck yeah. You understand? It's like, how can I explain it? It's like everybody's kind of got a secret self, right? And we walk through life hoping that, preferably it's the person we're in a love relationship with, can look and say, I see who you really are in there. Like, I get why other people like you or don't like you, but I really love the person in there. And Flood was the first person during that kind of era before Melancholy got recorded. He said, no, I want that. I want the real soul of the band. Now, I'm saying this because I'm going to assume everybody in the chat room here is friends, right? Okay. I've always been portrayed as the dark one. Let me tell you what, there's some darkness in that motherfucking band. Okay. Flood wanted the whole thing. He wanted the whole cloud. You know what I mean? He wanted the whole cloud. He didn't want my version of it. He didn't want Jimmy's version. He wanted the whole cloud, the whole cumulative cloud that was that band. That band at that time.
Yeah. And
he literally said, technically, like a quote, I want that. And we were like, okay. Because everybody was always trying to tell us not to do that. You understand? And to this day, people are still arguing with me about Siamese Dream. And I get it. It's this beautiful jet aircraft. I mean, it's so beautiful. I love it. You know what I mean? But it's not actually who we were or are. Melancholy is much closer to who we are as people. And I'm saying this in a personal way, when someone in your life, in this case, Flood, can see who you really are and says, I like that. Like, give me that. Like, don't give me the bullshit or what the record guy likes. Like, give me the brutality. And I'll tell you one quick story to ape on what Jimmy said. Flood, when we were recording like the heaviest takes, Flood wanted us to come in and rehearse. he said, just do your normal band rehearsal. I don't care what the fuck you play. I won't even bother you. Just do your normal band rehearsal. So we would just rehearse like our normal 1 hour, like work on a song, work on a riff, just boring shit to make sure we were totally warmed up. And they go, okay, right, we're going to record. So then like on this day, let's say it's fuck you. Okay. Now Jimmy's completely warmed up. Turn the PA all the way up. This is very unusual for a band to record with a full PA at full volume. The band at full volume, okay? I'm talking concert 120 decibels. And the producer comes in and goes like, Roy, I'm pressing record. Play like you guys play on stage. I don't want the sanitized version. I don't want the perfect little I want the brutality of what you guys can do. And we were like, cool. And we would play full fucking volume. So when you hear Bodies, Bullet with Butterfly Wings, Fuck You, Ruby, when you hear XYU, when you hear those songs, that is the band playing like to the edge of our insanity, literally.
Yeah.
And there's even XYU is a live. There's no overdubs. That is the band playing live in the studio. Just cranked. And by the way, in that case, we were in a little room. Like the room was like 10 by 10, like deafening. Like your teeth would rattle. It was so loud. You understand? So that violence is in the record. And then the beauty is then we turn around and do something like Cupid de Loc or Lily. And we had enough grace and trust with one another that Jimmy's was like, cool, I'll play the rusty scissors. He's not sitting there saying, I'm Jimmy Chamberlin, I got to get my drum fill in. He don't give a fuck. So we have just as much fun going with the scissors, right? And that's that record. So it allowed us to be the nerds we were, the nihilists we were, you know what I mean? And so something in that sprawl, that beautiful kind of diaspora of whatever was hatching, partially out of my mind, you actually had somebody standing on the other side of the glass going, great, that sounds fun. Do more of that, not less.
Yeah.
So cool. If you really think about it, such a beautiful affirmation.
Yeah. He's a wonderful
because the journey we'd been on was pointing us towards, more of what people think of when they think of pop grunge. Like Today was a big song. Disarm was a big song. Those people behind those glasses wanted more of that. They didn't want fucking XYU. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
I get it.
The beauty was somebody came along that had the fucking courage to say, no, that band is better than the band that everybody else thinks is the band. It's pretty cool if you really think about it. Because, and then the great thing is this is what I try to say to fans sometimes, between the Siamese Dream record and the Melancholy record, you got it all. You got the sun and the moon. You got the light and the dark. You got the perfect and the imperfect. You got it all. I mean, if that's all we ever did, then you'd say that's a pretty good accomplishment. It encapsulates in that era of our lives at the peak of our youth, and everybody knows, between 15 and 30, those are very intense years for everybody. We were able to capture the whole thing. The insanity, the stupidity, the silliness, the selfishness, the ego, all of it, it's all there. That's the beauty of it. But I really have to credit that there was somebody in that breach that said, no, I want that darkness. That's the cool part.
Yeah. I feel like we've been talking for a while, and I'm just conscious of time, because I could sit and do this all night, and I'm sure everybody that's currently listening in would happily have you both talk all night, but that isn't necessarily
Let's give Jimmy the last word. I want to hear what Jimmy has to say about all this insanity.
Yeah.
I'm getting teared up thinking about it. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think Flood was really the guy that came in and really allowed us to celebrate ourselves in a way that we probably wouldn't have left to our own devices. I mean, I remember thinking I remember meeting Flood in London at that some Nine Inch Nails party, talking to him for about 15, 20 minutes. And then, you know, obviously he had done U2 and the other records that he had done, and not really knowing kind of what his MO was going to be coming in, whether it was going to be kind of more of a synth based or that type of recording. And when he came in and said, hey, you know, let's get down to business and let's get to rocking, I mean, it was like, okay, full speed ahead. And then, you know, the fact that, you know, my thoughts were that, you know, it was going to be kind of rooted in this kind of quasi precision and kind of, you know, representative of the work that he had done before that. I remember at one point he said, hey, we got a night off. I want to come to your house and just listen to records. And he came over and we listened to records for 8 hours just to kind of get a bead on what I was into, right? And we listened to everything from like Deep Purple to Mahavishnu to like God knows what, Gino Vanelli. I mean, I don't know, every record I had, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, his belief in the band was a huge part of that record, and Machina too. And the trust we ended up having in him, you know, going into Machina was a big part of that record as well. I mean, I would show up in the morning to the studio and Flood would come in and remove all the cymbals from my drum set and just rearrange them. And then he would say, I want you to record the song. And I would say, well, I don't have all the parts. And he goes, no, I want you to play the parts. I want you to play the part, but I want you to use these instruments. And he would force me out of my comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
And challenge me to create within that context. And it made me such a better drummer. I mean, it made me really able to see holistically and from 30,000 feet kind of what the point of it all was. So yeah, he was a huge part of that stuff. And really, like, his confidence in the band it superseded our own.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Right?
Good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you so much to both of you.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who joined. We love you, appreciate you.
I feel like there's so much more to talk about, but I'm also conscious that people have things to do. So thank you again. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much. Take care.
Ciao, everyone. Bye. Take care.
Ciao.